Hey guys, my name is Dan Jacobson, Director of the Adventure Program at Forest Springs, and we are exactly 1 month out before the fishing trip. And I was thinking the other day, some of you haven't done a lot of this, so there's a few things I want to talk to you about as far as packing specifically and how we're going to travel together when we go to Canada about 1 month from now. Right now, as it stands, we've got 12 people, so we're actually going to divide into two groups of 6 people. So you will be part of a group of 6 men. This is about my favorite kind of trip. I'm excited to spend time with you guys. I'm excited to get to know you, and I want it to be a great trip for you. And I want you to know what you're getting into, because there's nothing worse for me than somebody showing up for a trip and being surprised by how hard it is or what they have to put up with. So you can lay your eyes on some of the gear that we're going to use, and actually what it looks like to portage a canoe, because I think that may be the biggest challenge for some of you, and I want to understand what you're getting into. It would be sad for me should somebody at this point, upon understanding fully what this trip is going to look like, should somebody decide they've got to bail. But it would also be very hard if you get there and we've got people who cannot do physically what we need to do. So I'm going to ask you guys to pay attention to this today and size yourself up. Maybe there's still some preparation that you can do even physically so that you're ready to come on this trip. When we're traveling in the park, everybody's going to have a backpack. This one's black and it's got some shoulder straps. We've got several different types, so they won't all look like this, but if you know stuff about packs, or if you're looking into packs, this is about 115 liters right here. This is a fairly large, waterproof portage pack, and everybody is going to have something like this to put your stuff in. And I will tell you right now, big picture, the goal is for you to show up with about 30 to 35 pounds of your own gear, because we're going to add stuff on top of that. We've got food, we've got cooking equipment, we've got group gear and tarps and different things that we're going to need to carry, and you're going to have to carry your share. Tents as well. That number should be in your head. Try to get into that 30 to 35 pound range with what you're bringing. 60-pound packs are heavy on the trail, and they're even a lot heavier when you're trying to get them in and out of canoes and having to lean over and reach over out over the water to pick up that big 60-pound pack. You do not want to bring too much stuff, and that actually is going to be the theme for today. Probably is bring less stuff and bring lighter stuff and bring smaller stuff. And most of us err, especially when we've been looking forward to a trip for a long time, we err in the direction of packing too much stuff or stuff that's too big. So I just want to walk you through a couple of maybe categories of stuff that you should already be thinking about. I've got here 3 different sleeping pads from different companies and different types. This is a reasonable size for a sleeping pad. This is my sleeping pad. Okay, it's even smaller. This is a little harder to inflate, but this is great in a pack. Doesn't weigh much. This is the classic Therm-A-Rest sleeping pad. I'm guessing that some of you have these already, and these are fine as well. What would not be fine would be the big, like 10-inch blow-up thing that maybe you got at Walmart, or something that really would have any more bulk than this. This is about the biggest you're going to be able to afford to go on a sleeping pad. If you don't have a sleeping pad that's going to work well, you can rent one from us here and we'll take care of you in that way, but you're not going to want something any bigger than this. So something to think about there. This is a nice small sleeping bag. Obviously the smaller you go, the less insulation it's going to be typically. We're going to be there in August, and while it may get cold, it's probably not going to get colder than maybe 40s or 50s at night. You probably would be okay with a pretty small sleeping bag. I would say this would be about maximum size on a sleeping bag as far as the space you're going to have to pack. So if you don't have something like this, maybe borrow something like this, or again, you could rent this from us. But do not bring the big rolled up sleeping bag that's about that big around. Okay, not gonna work. Don't bring that. Fishing stuff. All right, I love to fish, and one of the maybe the best things about fishing is planning for it, preparing for it, and buying lures and buying gear. And so I'm sure out there's a temptation. Maybe you guys already have a pile going of stuff that you picked up. And again, less and smaller is going to be better on this trip. This size of a tackle box would be good. This size would be even better. Do not show up with something like this. Don't do it. Do not show up with this tackle box. You're going to be hating life if you're having to try to carry that. I actually wouldn't even let you get that on the trail because I know what we're going to have to deal with. I'm into fishing for walleye, and I think between jig heads and some different tails, that's all that I'm going to need for catching walleye. If you bring a selection of jig heads, and we found white was really good, maybe a few different sizes of jig heads and a few different types of tails. So Gulp makes really great tails to put on your jig heads, different types, but they've got that scent in them, and it seemed like that helped last time. I would go, if you're going with like twister tail type tails for your jig heads, we found that 3-inch and 4-inch were really good. That's about the size that you'd be looking for. If you want to fish for pike, and there are plenty of pike up there, in fact, we found them very easy to catch, go ahead and throw in a spoon or two, maybe some leaders, probably some leaders, and that really would cover the fishing needs. You don't need to bring a bunch of stuff. You bring a bunch of stuff beyond that, you're not going to end up using it. It's not going to help you. So try to stick to that. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. But I have fished there. I have caught plenty of fish there, and I'm telling you, this is all that we really used, and I think it would be all that you would need. I'm going to bring this guy. This is a 4-piece that breaks down so that I can stow it away. When we're traveling in the park, we're not going to be fishing while we're traveling, so something that you can put away or take down is a really good idea. If you are going to bring a different rod, this is one I've had for a long time. This is an ugly stick. I think there's a little more fiberglass in this rod. Sometimes the carbon, like the graphite rods, seem to be a little brittle. We did break one last time, and that was sad. So these ugly stick, you can tell by the wrap they've got down here. Of course, they say ugly stick made by Shakespeare. These are really durable rods. This is a 2-piece. Make sure you bring in something that's durable. I'm going to just go with a spinning reel, and I'll bring an extra spinning reel so that you don't have to. If yours breaks, we should have something that you can use. That's it for gear. I'm going to go ahead and show you how we're going to travel in the park, because I really want you to understand what this is going to look like, because I want you to dig deep here, know what you're getting into, and make sure you're ready for this trip so that you're not stepping into something that you're not prepared for. So we'll go and do that now. Hey guys, just want to continue showing you a few things here, and specifically as it relates to how much work this trip is going to be. I want you to come in with your eyes open. I want you to understand what it is that we're going to be challenged by on this trip. There's a couple things I want to just demonstrate with this canoe, because if you haven't done this kind of trip before, you may not have the picture in your mind of what we're actually going to be doing and how much work it can be. I am hoping that all of you are able to watch this and understand it and be confident that you'll be able to do this trip. Again, I would hate for somebody to have to drop out, but if you're going to, now would be the time. So let's talk about it. This trip is not for everybody. This is a physically demanding, difficult trip. Again, if you've watched this and you have questions, I want you to get in touch with me. Obviously, we're going to travel in the van for quite some time, about 11 hours north, and then we're going to travel by canoe and by trail after that. And we are going to go over 40 miles together. That's paddling miles plus portaging miles. Portaging's hard work, and so I want you to just get a little bit of a taste for what that's going to look like. We're going to average about 10 miles a day, probably averaging 5 or 6 portages every day. So portage is when my paddle is interrupted by land, and the only way to get across the land is by walking with my canoe and with my gear. Some of our portages will be long, like 1/4 of a mile. They actually give the distances up there in yards, so I think 625 yards is the longest portage that any of us will do. Some of them are barely more than 20 feet, but all of them are going to require some hard work. So I just want to show you how we typically land a canoe. This is not the canoe that we're going to use. This is a much stronger, more durable canoe, and heavier canoe than what we're going to use. The canoes that we're going to take are going to be made to be light, not strong, which means we have to be very careful with them. When I come up to shore, I can't run my canoe into shore. A lot of times the landscape up there is just sheer rock, and you can't come in frontward. So what that means is I've got to be able to bring my canoe up, and I'm going to have to get my feet wet. There really isn't any other way to do that. I have to protect my canoe. So I'm always going to bring my canoe close to shore, and I'm going to step out, and that means my feet are going to be wet. Now, if I had boots up to here, I could maybe keep my feet dry. I have found that some type of a sandal like this, as you'll see in the booklet that we sent you, some type of a sandal like this is just going to be your best footwear. Let it get wet. You can do your drying later on. That's going to be something you want to think about. Make sure you're packing some good footwear for being able to do this. We will not be able to keep your feet dry, so don't come with that expectation. Carrying a canoe is a lot of work. This is probably a 70-pound canoe. Our canoes will be lighter than this. So this one's a little more of a challenge, but obviously every time we come to a portage, either you or your canoe partner will have to carry your canoe. There will be all types of gear that have to get carried, and we're going to have to do multiple trips on each of these portages. One of the partners from the canoe is going to have to carry the boat, and that requires just a little bit of strength and a little bit of technique. Again, this one's harder than the ones that we're going to use. What a portage is going to look like is the canoe on your back. Now, the way I just did that by myself, you may not be able to do or may not want to do. There are ways that your partner can help you load the canoe on your back, but looking at me right here with a 60-pound, 70-pound canoe, I may up there have to hike quarter mile with that canoe on my back. So sometimes guys have shoulder problems with this. The canoe needs to be balanced with my arms, and of course, just hiking down a trail with that much extra weight on your back is a challenge. Again, in order to not damage the canoes, when we get to the end of the trail, you're gonna need to get your feet wet and unload that canoe safely into the water and not onto the rocks. Again, I'm hoping in watching that you're able to assess your own physical condition. Am I able to do this? Is this gonna be a challenge for me? Which parts of this are gonna be a challenge for me? And I wanna talk to you. There is no option to get to Canada and just realize we can't do it. Let's sort this out ahead of time. I hope that just in showing you this video that you've got some sense of what you're getting into. I think it's going to be amazing. I think it's going to be fun. I want you to be looking forward to it, but take some stock, make sure you're ready, because we want you to come ready, and we look forward to traveling with you on the lakes and on the trails in Ontario 1 month from now. Thanks.